So hello and good morning, guys, and welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. Mate, I just realized that when I'm saying hello and good morning, this is always what I used to do when I'm checking in with my clients. So hello and good morning, Steve, but it's not morning time anymore, is it?
Well, for me, it's when does this get released though? This get released? Yeah, it doesn't get released in the morning. Time. Depends when people listen to this shit.
Yeah, when you're American, hello and good morning, or it's midday as well. Then when we're releasing it here at 7 p.m. But time zones are so fucked up anyway. Whenever you have a consultation with someone from California, for example, it is just awful because you hardly ever find the time that suits both of you.
Yeah, or Australia, New Zealand is like either it's there really early in the morning for them or like really, it doesn't always work out.
Yeah. That's why you guys should appreciate the roundtable discussion with Mike, with Eric, and with Menno. Because Mike is sitting in Mike is sitting in the US, you're sitting in the UK, obviously. Eric is sitting in New Zealand. That Menno is just
all over
Menno.
the place. Yeah. He is a digital nomad, for those who don't realize.
He is. But yeah, Steve, tell me a little bit about your week. Well, what did you do?
So, what's happened this last week? I did deadlift. So we recorded. We recorded after my after my deadlifts. So today I normally would be deadlifting again, but this is the first day of my deload. So I pushed my mesocycle, which I normally do a 4-to-1 accumulation to deload paradigm. I pushed for a 5-to-1, which was beneficial. I think I pretty much, for the most part, I increased performance or maintained from the last week. I think for my pressing movements, I'd pretty much hit my maximal recoverable volume the week beforehand, the most I can do and recover from. So maintaining performance there. But for my leg training particularly, I saw increases. For my rowing movements, pulling movements, I saw mostly increases. Didn't really play much with like total training volume. So I just eked out another week of pretty much a little bit more overload. It wasn't necessary, but I think it was beneficial because I managed to get through it. And I don't feel like, quite often when I get to this point, I systemically feel like crap, but I physically feel very beat up. Like my quads are still, normally at this point, I'm telling Pascal that I'm not sure if my quads are fully recovered. And normally they just about recover. My quads today are still very sore. Like if I stick my leg out and tense it, I'm like, ow.
What did you tell me yesterday?
What did I say? I can't remember.
Pascal, my quads are as sore as they've never been before in my entire life.
I think they may well be the longest they've been the sorest for. And if there's ever a week where that's potentially appropriate, is the week before you know you're going to deload, which is, if anyone saw I posted up my squat 160 for 9. That last rep was truly like that was a true 0 reps in reserve. Like it's funny when sometimes I don't know if you know this, Pascal, sometimes I'll see people and I'll see them do a rep and I'm like, right, yeah, that's good. Like you've hit failure. And then I see they go for another rep and I'm just like, why are you doing this? They always fail. I'm just like, why would you go for that next rep? You know you're going to fail.
So I have two things to say on that one. So first and foremost, I once saw that Bryce Lewis was doing a live session. I think it was over on Facebook or on Instagram. I looked at it, right? It was a squatting live session. And he went for an AMRAP set. And people were just like, mate, you easily had like 3 more reps in reserve. And he was just like, no. I can tell you that was my true repetition max in that sense, right? And it looked smooth, it looked easy, but he knows himself quite well. I mean, he's a world champion, so I would assume that he knows his shit, and he is like a smart cookie as well. Has a good self-perception, I would assume, right? Yeah. And second of all, I had this one guy at my old gym who always went to failure. Always. It was crazy. And I would have been, so if I were him, I would be annoyed every single time I would squat because he always needed to throw it off in the power rack and I was laying there and he didn't bother in actually putting down the plates. So he was trying to that each and every single time, just chucking it up to his height again. And it's just like, mate, come on, why?
The amount of fatigue just generally that will bring. Oh, God.
And each and every single set, it wasn't like he was only doing one set, going all out to failure. But I think even like, maybe he was doing something like starting strength and always going to failure. And then next week he is reducing the weight or so. I don't know.
But yeah, I couldn't sustain, like physiologically, I know like I'm sore basically all over the place. Not everywhere, like my calves, if they ever get sore, it's like, oh wow, like that got sore. They very rarely do. But yeah, I'm just feeling generally beat up, but like mentally I feel fairly fresh. But from a psychological standpoint of going in and doing similar work to what I've been doing, it's a lot of volume. It's a lot of heavy, hard training. I'm looking forward to taking the deload. So yeah, the last week's been really good. Hit some all-time PRs. I think if I actually went through my entire program, like even down to like my single arm machine rows, all of those movements, I think I've probably hit PRs like across the board, which is really cool. Not like massive ones, but like decent ones that I'm really happy with. So some of my, and it's crazy like to think how like things like my delts, my volume got pretty high with delts. Like they seem to just recover like nothing. So yeah, it's been a really productive. I think this is the best I've ever looked. And at 190 pounds again, I'm happy with that weight increase. And now, just pushing onwards and upwards. Fortunately, this last month as well, there's not really been anything socially that's been going on. Like I like social events completely, but there's not really been much going on. So even on weekends, I've been able to do my twice daily training, which normally I might not quite be able to do because I'll be out and about busy. But yeah, there's not really been much going on. So I've just plowed and just put everything into what I've been doing this month, and it's kind of paid off. Been getting a few like niggles this week, but nothing major, which is really good. So yeah, it's kind of when times like this happen, I can see why people just want to keep going, because it's like the going is good, but I know I've got nothing to give. I know when I go and deadlift today and do my deload session, I just know it will feel awful and so heavy and slow. So yeah, no, good week. How about yourself, Pascal?
Nothing to say, actually. It was my deload week, so yeah, nothing fancy. Going in, doing really shorter sessions. And this time around, I think that I'm in the past, or in general, I'm someone who is tending to go too hard than too light. Also with the RERs. I would assume that I have kind of a good understanding about myself when it comes to RERs, but I think that every once in a while you get caught up in the moment and you don't realize what your true RER really was, and you push it too far, actually, instead of you kept too many reps in reserve. And I think that is more often the case for me, that I'm pushing it too hard. And yeah, this week was just like, I said to myself, okay, I take it really lightly. I'm just going in through the ranges of motions, because I have so many niggles and achings here and there that I just have to take that break. And I just want to get in there quickly, in and out. Just also dropped a couple of accessory lifts, which was just like, I don't want to further dig into my recovery capabilities with them, even though it's just like something abs and calves, for example. But because I had knee issues and also with the back issue, I didn't want to load or do axial loading, so standing calf raises. And I don't want to do seated calf raises, for example, because then the pressure comes on the knee as well. And then I just said, okay, just leave it be here. Just doing the most necessary lifts, if you want to say that. And that's what I did this week. So nothing fancy, really.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, especially deload weeks, keeping like, I always think to people like the thing you can do probably worse on a deload week is not take it light enough. Yeah. Like you can't really take it too light on a deload, to be honest.
It's crazy, because recently I had like 2 clients who do I need to actually explain it to? Like, okay, what's the benefit of going too hard in a deload? There is no benefit. There isn't, because first and foremost, when you push it hard, you're probably still sub-maximally loading or sub-maximal volume. So you're probably at minimum effective volume or something like that, but subpar to what you've actually been doing over the past mesocycle. But it's still too much to properly and adequately recover from, to give you that boost and readiness for the next mesocycle. So you're not getting anything of these two worlds, right? So you're not really properly overloading, but also you're not properly and adequately recovering. And then you are starting the new mesocycle. There's no benefit in that, right? So the deload, take it as it's intended to, right? And then be able to push it harder for the next 4 weeks instead of going in there. Yes, deloads may be boring, but there is an intention behind that. And we've talked about it. And I think that Mike brought it up at one point, that when you are a committed athlete, you know that you need to take them and you want to take them, right? And there's no question about it. And you're not, I don't know, complaining about it or so. You're just accepting that you have to take it. And instead of then going in too early or cut it like halfway through the deload only because you kind of feel good, that is not always the indicator that you are fully recovered, especially when it comes to joints, tendons, ligaments. They tend to need more time to recover. And if you're then only going when you are physically perhaps ready, right? Maybe that isn't the way to go, because once again, something like the soft tissues, we don't really feel when they are degraded or so.
It's kind of scary in many ways, those injuries, when you see them come and they come out of the blue and people are like, oh my gosh, like this completely came out of the blue. And then, I don't know, I wonder how many times you could then look at that person, look at their training and be like, so when did you back off? And it's like, no, instead of backing off, I just reduced my volume a little bit. I still trained hard and just changed the movement. And I just went through this because whatever it might be, the novelty, learning a new movement, they can just alter it without having to actually take a foot off the gas. And they're just constantly beating themselves up and never really allowing things to heal up properly. So it is scary.
Mate, it is. And I've been through that myself with my hip. It was a degradation. Right, I've done cartilage damage because I was first and foremost predisposed to have kind of an artificial hip in the future. But because of that repetitive nature of the exercises I've been doing, and because of shitty form in the past, I was constantly pushing the limits at that joint and overdoing it and causing damage over time. I mean, I've never felt that until it was too late, because you first will experience pain when it comes to something like cartilage damage, when it starts to be third grade or fourth state of cartilage damage. And that is already, the fourth grade is already like bone on bone contact. Right? And that is too late. But with the first and second grade, you don't feel it. There's no pain involved, right? So you can't really tell or know whether you are causing any kind of damage there. And when you're always just pushing it and you think that all is fine, then over time you're degrading that joint or tissue maybe, and then just it snaps and shit's breaking loose, and then you maybe will suffer from that for the rest of your life.
And this is why we always talk about how like the best bodybuilders generally, or the people doing this the longest and enjoying it the most, are the ones who are consistently doing it, and they're the ones not getting injured, the ones who are kind of taking care of these things. And in many ways, we've also said it's like a matter of when rather than if you get injured, which is also a thing, but you can definitely prevent that when happening by taking care of these other elements. And I think oftentimes it's like, oftentimes it's like, oh, am I getting good sleep? Am I having like enough sleep? Maybe I should be tracking this, blah, 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 blah. It's like, or do you feel tired and beat up? Are you using caffeine to get through the day? You know if you're not getting enough sleep. And like if you feel like, yes, like this thing's niggling and like you're never feeling quite recovered, I mean, when you're advanced, like very advanced, that's kind of like a thing that you just kind of have that. But if you're nowhere near that and that's constant, like, are you honestly taking your deloads? Are you doing them properly? Because a lot of people don't. But we probably blabbed on enough. I think oftentimes we feel like, at least I do, I feel like I have to defend some of these kind of things that to us are very much like, this is just very like good practice. Like you just do this. It's like being, I don't know, a good human being and like a good person. Like they just come to us as like obvious. But I think because they're not obvious to everyone, we often feel like we have to reinforce it. And oftentimes some people try and almost talk down to some of these principles. And then we're like, what? Like this makes no sense to us. And we can kind of be like, shrug it off. But other people are like, actually, maybe I shouldn't be deloading. Maybe I like deloading it like that frequently. Like maybe I should only deload like once a year. And then we're like, no, guys, this probably isn't a good strategy. And we have to explain it again. So this is probably why there's a bit of swings and roundabouts on the podcast sometimes.
Yeah. And additionally to that, and this is something I have to remind myself as well, so often that, sure, we are doing that since a long period of time, and we have done shitty things in the past, and by that learned and done our research over the past years. And these people, some of them may not be in that position where they have come to that realization themselves. Also, we may not forget that our biases may be, our beliefs may be biased as well. So only because I think that deloads may be beneficial doesn't 100% mean that I'm super right and that everyone needs to do that, right? And when we're then like recommending that, sure, there lacks a little bit of context there as well, but could potentially be that I'm wrong as well in that belief. So when we are then talking to someone who's not really that well versed in that field, or is just got into the field, and we are just like saying, "Dude, what the fuck? This is something we've discussed like 1,000 times." Then I have to take a backseat because I'm causing the problem and not that guy, right? And in that sense, I just always need to remind myself that everyone started somewhere. Some people have other beliefs, other experiences that is shaping and forming their way and methodologies, and that is absolutely fine.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add. I think just a case of, like any sport, there's always a period of time where you pull back and you don't always push it. And that for us is a deload.
Yeah.
Or one of the ways.
Yeah. Cool. So, diving into the questions?
Yeah.
Cool. So, Jeff has asked, Jeff Nipper, it was. No, just kidding. Jeff Albert.
How to get a big neck. That's all I think about when I hear Jeff now.
Yeah. Yeah, it is the question. How do you get a big neck? No, so Jeff has asked, how do you ensure adequate electrolyte intake, craving salt while cutting? I think that is a really, really good question that may be really great being answered from you, because you have delved into the topic of sodium intake quite extensively over the past, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's one of those areas where I think people either go to either or extreme, where they're either completely ignorant to it and don't think about it at all, which I don't think actually is necessarily always a bad thing. I don't think the general population really need to think about it heavily. I don't think many people need to, and probably the worst extreme I see are people who really overthink it, and maybe they're tracking it and like they're getting really anal with their electrolytes and like all of this stuff. And for the most part, the body sorts itself out. If you have normal functioning hormones, the body is very good at sorting itself out and creating a homeostasis, which is basically what you're after in terms of electrolytes, like getting the right balance. If you have slightly excess salt one day, you'll probably get more thirsty, you'll drink more water, and then it will kind of get the right pH balance, or the right balance that we're looking for. And it's only when you have these acute differences where maybe you do go out and have like a really salty meal, or one day you're massively hydrated, where you experience problems, whether it might be like just dehydration and cramping, or these sort of like aspects that can come about from it, like poor muscular contractions and things can happen. So I think for the most part, the body's just very good at auto-regulating it, to be quite honest. You will crave salt. if the body has a good way of actually, you start craving it. If you do require some more salt in your diet, if you end up having more salt, you'll drink more, these sort of things. It's just very good at making sure you're okay. And a lot of people are scared to consume too much salt. And when I say salt, I kind of mean sodium. But to be honest, if you're healthy and you can like control it normally, the body will just ramp up other aspects, and you'll just increase your water intake and things like this, so that it's not something you need to necessarily be concerned about, and you can almost do it to taste. Something to be aware, however, is, like you said, when this person's in the context of cutting, quite oftentimes we reduce the amount of like processed foods we're having. We might switch to more quote unquote clean foods. These generally have less salt within them, less sodium. For example, if you're moving from like consuming a lot of like cereal and like breads and things like this, those have quite a lot of sodium within them, and then you're switching to maybe like vegetables and you're not salting those, then yeah, you've got an acute big change in the amount of sodium you're taking in. And this can quite often happen when you are dieting, that your sodium intake drops to such an amount that you experience problems. And then this might be a case where, okay, I'm just going to start salting my foods a bit more and see if that helps. But I just would never jump around. I'd never like suddenly go from, oh, I'm consuming no added salt, and then I'm going to salt everything and add like 2 grams of sodium to everything, because that can cause problems. You kind of want to try and transition all of these aspects. A lot of things in your diet, you'd only ever want to transition them. So yeah, like I say, for the most part, the body's very good at managing it. If you go and change something suddenly, that's when you see problems. When you are in the context of dieting, it can be beneficial to add a bit of salt to your foods, because this can help with muscular contractions. It can make you just feel a little bit more alert and better, because having a low sodium intake and low sodium levels isn't a great thing. I don't get people to be anal about it and track it throughout periods of time. Basically, the way I go about it is 2 weeks out or so, or during a period of time where we might be practicing a peak week or going through a peak week, I'll get them to monitor their added salt to their foods, get them to keep their food the same throughout that period of time, so that they don't have to try and track sodium from foods, because Pascal and me know how complicated this can be. Some foods track it in sodium, some of them track it in salt, some of them don't have that data available on it. So if you just keep that blanket diet the same and just track your added sodium, then you know kind of how much you're having, get that average intake, keep that, and then I can acutely change it if required. And then, yeah, that's the only time I will actively track sodium generally. But for the rest of the time, like I said, the body's very good at adjusting to it. If you're craving a bit more, have a bit more. If you're kind of having lots, you'll end up drinking more. The body will sort itself out and keep you in a good range. So I think hopefully that somewhat answers it. I think people want like hard and fast rules, but there's not kind of a hard and fast rule of this sort of thing, because you have to consider as well, with all of this, like it's something that you excrete. So if you're going through like a hard training week versus a light training week, if the environment is different, like there's so many different aspects to take into consideration. Because I remember during my peak week one time, it was really hot and I was sweating like a pig, and I was like, I'm tracking my sodium, but I'm excreting more sodium. And it's like, oh, this is something I actually cannot precisely control. So I think that is, in a way, a stress reliever, because you don't need that tighter control. The body within ranges is fine.
Brilliant answer. I was just waiting until the moment that you are stopping blabbing on here. No, it was a brilliant answer, really. I have nothing to add there. I think you covered it all and even exceeded. So I don't know how to pronounce that name. I don't know if that's even a true name. I would assume that it's kind of from Thailand or so. Like An, but A-N-H. On, maybe? I don't know. So On asks, thoughts on 24 to 48 hour periods of fasting after a binge to counteract the large calorie intake. Thoughts on fasting for 24 to 48 hours periods to reduce weekly calorie intake.
I'll let you take that one. I know you've had... I've never... Well, no. I'll just let you take it. I don't know what I was going to say.
Of course, I'm not giving a black and white answer here. I think it can be done.
No.
But I would hardly recommend against it. At least... So let me rephrase that. I think when your food relationship is great and that it wasn't really a binge out of, I don't know, true cravings, but more so because of an event such as, I don't know, Thanksgiving, Christmas, where it was just ending up that so many calories came in and now you're feeling bad a day after. Yes, you can make adjustments to your caloric intake over the next couple of days, as long as your food relationship is in a good place, right? If it's not, I would just accept what has happened and move forward. I've tried it myself, like counteracting or redoing the damage I did, quote unquote, on that day. And most of the time, it just ends up in a negative downward spiral. You're trying to restrict yourself. By that, you're becoming even more hungrier. By that, you are starting to binge once again. Then you feel actually really shitty again. And the cycle just continues and repeats itself, right? It is like a vicious cycle that, or the risk of you starting a vicious cycle with that is pretty high. And I've seen it with a couple of people already. You would be surprised to know how many people are actually having issues with binging and overeating, especially in our industry, where you are consciously restricting yourself unnecessarily sometimes, right? So some people are just too rigid when it comes to their macronutrient intake and are too strict and disciplined when it's not really appropriate or required for them. And then it ends up with that actually building bad food relationship and bad food habits in general. Sometimes you know it yourself in the past, you didn't really think about your food intake, which is not necessarily good, right? I think that having an awareness of what you're eating is always a positive thing, right? But we also know that taking it to extreme levels of macro tracking and being overly rigid can actually backfire as well for some individuals. So in that regard, I would just say that either option one, where it was due to some kind of event, and if you have a good relationship with food, you can actually implement that. I wouldn't really recommend fasting. I would just cut like 100 to 200 calories for the next couple of days to make up for it, right? That it doesn't really end up in that vicious cycle. Second option is just move on. Accept it, maybe analyze it, why it happened in the first place, so that you may potentially counteract that in the future. And that is just what I would recommend. Everything else would just be irresponsible to say.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, fantastic answer. I think it was really well covered. And whenever I hear about these things, it always makes me think of the kind of pendulum swinging. And it's like if you swing too far one way, you swing too far the other way, and then it builds momentum and you end up in that binge and purge cycle, and it can just go wrong. So unless you've got very good control of that pendulum where you can swing back and then get back into your thing, like you said, the good food relationship, then maybe like try something similar, maybe a softer approach, like you said, just reducing a little. But for a lot of people, it's just not a great relationship to start trying to get it into and building, and you don't want to make it a habit.
And I mean, the term binge nowadays is already just coined with just a little bit overeating, up to the point where it's just like insane overeating. So it also depends on what you mean with binging. But also on the last note, it's just like when you're truly binging, then you have a higher risk of actually fluctuating back and forth. And in that regard, I would definitely recommend against the first approach and just go with the one like, okay, just accept what happened and move forward, instead of trying to counteract an extreme approach with another extreme approach.
Yeah. I think you might have made a quote about that before, where if you try and do that, you just end up with a fire or something. Trying to put out a fire with a fire doesn't go anywhere but build a bigger fire.
Yeah, totally.
Something along those lines.
So yeah, should we move on?
Yeah.
So the last time was Tyler the Creator, right?
Yeah. Is he someone else now?
This time it is Caden the Conqueror. So brilliant. Hey Caden. And he asks, he or she, I don't know, Intra workouts. When massing at about 175 pounds body weight, what are your thoughts on an intra workout of 20 grams protein from whey plus 40 grams of carbs from dextrose? I'm thinking less than 20 grams doesn't fully stimulate muscle protein synthesis, but does whey take too long to digest to be useful intra workout?
So,
do you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, I think, I'm happy to go for this because I know, I don't think you use intra workouts. I have used them ever since I started training twice per day. I use them a lot. And then in contest prep, I was using them. I don't know if I've used them outside of the context of training twice per day. I might have implemented them a little bit in my mini cut just because most of my carbohydrates otherwise were like veg. So I was just like, at least I'll try and get some sort of like, easier form of more performance orientated carbohydrate intake to replenish glycogen and stuff. So yeah, I'll try and dissect this. So for the most part, intra workouts are not something you will see much of a benefit from unless you are training twice per day or you're training the same sort of muscle groups twice per day. And you've got long high volume workouts where you are potentially in a state of some glycogen depletion from maybe not even like you would never achieve, I don't think you'd ever achieve full muscle glycogen depletion, especially from just typical bodybuilding workouts. But you might have some kind of blood sugar level drops, and that might kind of cause a little bit of a lack of focus and concentration, and you might not quite perform as well after a long period of time of training. That's more likely to happen again when you are dieting, when you're in a caloric surplus in an off season. That's much less likely. So we're kind of giving some context of to where it's more beneficial. So the twice daily training, high long volume sessions where you're potentially going to be a little bit more depleted, likely in a scenario of cutting rather than in a surplus or maintenance. So then the theoretical benefits and some of the things I felt more energized in my sessions. I can't say whether or not my recovery has been better between sessions or anything along those lines, but I just find it to be a pleasurable thing to have a flavored sweet drink to have within my session that I know hopefully should be bolstering some sort of performance in some regard. The point of having carbohydrates and a protein together isn't for the muscle protein synthesis response generally. You would just be having that small amount of protein to help upregulate the glycogen replenishment because it just helps with that kind of, it works in a synergistic matter and has some potential anti-catabolic properties because you're getting whey protein in there. You can argue obviously that it might not be in your system quite in time. It depends on the rest of the context of your diet and everything like this. But if you're sipping it if you've got a big high volume session, you're sipping it kind of at the start to middle, then it'll probably be starting to get into your system by the end of the session, which could just help you get better quality of training towards the end. So yeah, the anti-catabolic kind of properties of it being whey protein, the helping of upregulate glycogen replenishment, and then obviously the dextrose in there is doing all of those things like providing blood sugar to help with that kind of mental capacity within training, and then some recovery properties in terms of just you're replenishing glycogen as soon as possible after your workout if you're training again or you're kind of trying to help bolster performance towards the end of a high volume session. So with all that said, I don't know if I answer. So in terms of 20 grams of whey and then 40 grams of dextrose, I think that's okay. I don't necessarily think you need to worry about kind of having the 20 gram minimum of protein to try and spike MPS. I don't think that's why you're having that there. I think you're just having it there to help the carbohydrates uptake. I think 40 grams of carbohydrates is fine. You just have to be kind of, I think the least I would ever go with generally in an intra would be like 10 grams of protein with a 20 grams of carbohydrate. And then the most I'd go, I wouldn't go like, you can see how much you can handle and it might just help you consume more carbohydrates when you're massing. That's another consideration because if your training sessions are long, then it's a large period of time you're going without food. If you're on shit tons of carbs, maybe it's a time where you can just drink and you can have some carbohydrates there and get in some more of those. But yeah, just see how much your stomach can handle because some people get some gastric distress with dextrose, but I've never experienced it personally. So hopefully that's answered his question somewhat. I know you might have a slightly different opinion on it.
Yeah, I'm just not a big fan of intra workout nutrition, simply because I'm quite skeptical about the entire concept when you're not already training like 2 hours or 2.5 hours or so, or twice daily. There, I may see the benefits in that, but only more so for the next training session, because when we take a look at how energy pathways function and how food is actually digested and being digested, even though that it's in a liquid form and dextrose and whey. Take whey, for example. In a fasted state, whey only in water can take up to 1 hour to be digested, right? So if you keep that in mind, and zipping it intra-workout would mean that you are already starting your training session and probably first would get the benefits of it like after your session or towards the end of the session. And once again, then we are back at the thing what I just said, that when your training sessions aren't that long, I don't see the validity in doing so. I could make a case where I could see the validity for it if you're having troubles throughout the day to actually get on your total amount of calories, because you're saying that you are massing right now, and if you do, and you're consuming 40 grams of carbs together with 20 grams of protein, that is already kind of a decent amount of extra calories consumed quite easily, because it is in the middle of the session, it is in a liquid form, and maybe I would see then the validity in that, in just zipping it on the go to get in some extra calories. But from the perspective of boosting your workout, boosting your training session, especially in a surplus environment, I don't think that you necessarily need these forms of glycogen, because we are not, as physique athletes, even if you're training super high volume, we are not really using that much of glycogen in one single workout. So there's not really the necessity of, replenishing your glycogen levels on the go because you're expending so much, because that's simply not the case. So yeah, all in all, as you may hear, I'm just really skeptical about intra-workout nutrition. I don't see the validity other than the ones we already mentioned. But I would rather say, okay, mate, save the calories for a lovely meal or for some treats like post-workout or so. And especially when, depending on when you're training on the day, and you had maybe some whole foods right before or a couple of hours before, there's plenty of food in your system and you don't really need anything for boosting your workouts. That's my opinion on the matter.
Cool. Covered.
Cool. So, Rachel.
Do you think you're Rachel from Friends now?
Yeah, I did. I actually did. Jennifer Aniston. God damn, she looked good. Rachel is a lovely name, by the way, I think. But anyway, currently fighting a cold and have noticed the scale going up 3 to 4 pounds. I'm quite sure it's water retention, but I'm interested in possible reasons why. Do you guys have any experience with weight fluctuations while sick? Thanks.
So do you want me to crack at first?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, to be honest, there's so many ways you can have a look at this, because there's so many different sicknesses. You could have people who are like vomiting and like excreting loads. You could have other people who are congested, so that kind of can alter whether or not your scale weight is going to change. I think the thing she highlighted there is to know that the data she's collecting right now is somewhat dirty. It's kind of like obscured by the fact she's ill. So she needs to just kind of almost just trust the process of what she's doing, tick the boxes, and things will normalize as she gets out of this period of time. There's various things that could be going on, like cortisol could be rising, and that could cause associated water retention. She could be changing her dietary habits. She could be changing her exercise habits. You don't know what time of the month it was also for her, so that could be playing a role somewhere. I think there's loads of angles you could look at it, and I don't think there's a general statement where you can say your weight will increase or decrease with a cold. It definitely depends on everything else that's going on, and I would just say, whatever the data you're collecting right now, just highlight it as I was ill during this time, so I might not want to take too much kind of attention to that, pay too much attention to that.
I mean, I have not that much to add, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of the whole biology kind of thing. But when you know that from a basic principle kind of standpoint, the body always wants to be in homeostasis. If you want to do a little bit of research on homeostasis, go and look it up, right? It's not just when we're talking about training and gaining muscle or losing fat, but it basically applies to all systems or all the processes in your body, right? They want to be at homeostasis. And if there are some kind of intruders, or you're getting sick, maybe your temperature is rising, all these kind of things will have an impact on your homeostasis system in the body. And the body will try to react accordingly, and that may very well be one of the reactions to it.
And Rachel, we hope you get well soon.
Yeah, totally. Of course.
Especially if you're Rachel Geller, which you are.
She's listening to the Improvement Season podcast. Man, she should hire us. Then we only need her as a client anymore. So, yeah, let's move on to the next one. It is again from Caden. Do you want to take that, or should we skip to the next one?
How many have we got? We've got 20 minutes left.
Yeah. I will move on. Sorry, Caden.
He's going to start renaming. He's going to just have all different names.
Yeah,
so we answer
totally. That is a good solution for people who want to actually throw out a couple of more questions. I will quickly read through it. Okay, no, this was one we can actually skip. Sorry, Kane. The question is good in it for itself. It is about upright rows and whether they are safe and stuff. But yes. we will save it for another time. So Sean has asked, for someone starting out on their journey and considering physique versus bodybuilding, how would you defer training, etc., if much at all? Thanks.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, you need to be aware of the rules and guidelines, what each and every sport entails, because they are quite different. And when it comes to men's physique, this is something we brought up in the past a couple of times, and it makes me sad every single time I'm saying that, but men's physique, you are supposed to actually look good in general. Also from a facial expression, you should have a good smile and all that kind of stuff. And many people aren't really aware of that, but that is part of men's physique. It is kind of a fitness model category, right? Or at least it stems from that. It's not really that anymore, at least not to IFBB standards. When you take a look at them, they could easily, some of them could actually easily transition over to classic physique and then even to bodybuilding or something. But anyway, in that regard, this is definitely something you have to consider as well. When it then comes to the training aspect of things, obviously you're wearing board shorts when you're competing, so you can take a backseat on training legs. I would still recommend doing so because training legs is just nice and you don't want to look that much out of proportion, especially also your calves are showing, so you want to actually still put some emphasis on the calf area. But sure, when you then want to come up with a training protocol, I would obviously also here mostly train the upper body. Really bring out the delt portion, the V-taper. You want to really have that wide look, right? And probably you can get away with a little bit more training then, because the lower body lifts are mostly the most taxing ones, especially squats, deadlifts, heavy compound lifts in that ballpark as well. And if you're not doing them, you can actually get away with training your upper body, probably even more so, right? I don't know if I need to touch on the bodybuilding aspect, because, I mean, when you're explaining kind of men's physique, it is kind of self-explanatory what you will be doing when you're training for bodybuilding. And also, yeah, obviously, once again, the poses will differ quite drastically as well.
Yeah, I think it, like you basically just outlined there really well, it just comes down to specificity of the sport. Specifically, men's physique doesn't require any thighs. It just requires some calves and then a good upper body. And for bodybuilding, you need everything to be as big as possible, but symmetrical at the same time, obviously. So that has its own individual caveats. What I would say is I've got some men's physique competitors, and they are almost doing men's physique as a way to then transition later into bodybuilding. So quite oftentimes you just do everything because a lot of guys love training legs, and some of them have frustratingly very well developed legs, but they just want to do men's physique. I don't know. But you're completely right in that if you reduce some of the training volume on your legs, then you probably have more recovery capacity for more upper body training, big delts, good V-taper, great abs, white teeth, good haircut.
Yeah, I couldn't do men's physique.
I couldn't do it for shit. I'd be so awful.
But you got good teeth, Steve, so...
That's my only selling point. No calves, terrible abs, terrible V-taper.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I couldn't do that then as well. Because I'm just blocky, no abs whatsoever.
Just try and smile our way through. Great hair and eyebrows, though.
Yeah, that's true. And I could maybe wear a mustache then. With the board shorts, that wouldn't look too shabby, I think.
You'd stand out at least.
Yeah, that's true. So, shall we take another one?
Yes, we've probably got time for one more.
So, this is again from Sean. I skipped that one as well, because just to be fair for Caden. It was Caden the Conqueror, right?
Conqueror, yeah.
Yeah, Caden the Conqueror. So just to keep things fair here, because this is the Improvement Season podcast. So we are coming to Dolly. And Dolly asks, what are your considerations for improving quad development for someone who hates to squat?
Well, you've got to squat. It's the only way to get big quads. So,
totally
answered.
It's the king of all exercises, as they used to say.
I mean, I think Tom Platz would probably tell you to fuck off. No quads for you.
That's
no
true. But in that regard, right, I think that it's quite... So many people are quite conflicted when it comes to that. There are so many people who are promoting like not squatting at all. And some people are saying like you have to squat if you want to develop really, really good legs. And so I do love squats. I have to say that upfront, right? But I tend to more so be in the camp of the first ones I mentioned, the ones who are saying that you don't necessarily have to squat to build some amazing quads. And to bring one up, I'm not really following him, but JP, for example, look at him. He's a mass monster, and he is doing, yes, it is still kind of a squat, but it is more so hack squats, pendulum squats, so squatting variations that are specifically or more so targeting that exact area, right? And especially when it comes then down to these heavy compound lifts in general or exercises in general. But I'm just more so referring to the squat now. Squats can be amazing, or it can be an amazing exercise, but when you're not built for it, it isn't. It truly isn't. It's the same principle that applies to deadlifts. I think that deadlifts may be an amazing exercise for those who are well built to do so, but those who aren't, it's not the best option to go with, I think. And easy as it is, I think it's kind of a straightforward answer. You don't have to squat to build some really, really solid legs. That is the beauty of all physique sports. We aren't really required to do these three big three, like the bench, the deadlift, and the squat, to build an impressive physique. And there are tons of people out there who have proven that to be true. Brilliant
answer. Yeah, I think the only way I ever put this into people's minds, and it's funny, it still comes up, but I can remember when I was like one-on-one PTing, I had a client who she wanted to like grow muscle and stuff. She was like, but I don't like oats, and I don't like peanut butter, and I don't like chicken. And just like you don't need to eat oats, peanut butter, and chicken, you just need to kind of get your overall nutrition right. You could have whatever sources of protein, fat, and carbohydrates for the most part. You can see the results you want. The same with exercise selection. As long as you're getting sufficient stimulus for the muscle then you're going to grow it. Again, I'm the same as you. I love squatting. I think if you can squat, I think it's going to be a great mass builder for you probably, but you don't need to do it, especially if you hate it. I've got clients who aren't built for squats or don't like squats. There's other great movements. You just need to identify those.
Yeah. And mate, it is so sad when you do love it and you can't do it, because right now I simply can't do it, right? And I would love to. And I'm always stubborn. I'm always walking against the wall, then falling to the floor, lying there for a couple of hours unconsciously, and then I get up and walk again against the wall, right? And that's not the way to go about things. But it is just because I'm so emotionally attached to all these kind of lifts. I finally, like last year, took some steps away from deadlift. That was already the first step to becoming a better version of myself, right? I will probably implement it, or I'm still implementing it every once in a while when I'm doing, for example, the prana phase. But probably this is going to be the case for squats as well, because of my back and because of my hip and because of the knee, right? That most likely I'm simply not built for it. Or I seriously have to invest a lot of time to change my form, that, I don't know, something like that doesn't flare up anymore. I don't know. So the best or the better solution for me, at least, would be to just accept it and move on to the next thing, right? It is like a bad relationship. Yeah. So you're splitting up with your partner because you simply can't get along. Maybe your partner's always cheating on you, right? You have kind of issues, always fighting, and you always split up, right? But you're always getting back together, and because you can't be by yourself, you can't accept it being on your own, right? But the best thing, and you know it yourself, would be to just move forward and just to live your life and focus on other things instead of always falling back and making the same mistakes over and over again. That wasn't his questions, but I just wanted to bring that up.
I was going to bring up a different analogy. I think yours was actually better. It was going to be like you're lactose intolerant, but you just keep going back for cheese and you just keep shitting your pants. And you're like, I should have done this.
So my old roomie, so he's not listening, but I don't give a fuck. I would even tell you guys if he were or if he was listening. So he was is lactose intolerant, and he actually had the thing to eat like a milk chocolate bar, right? But he didn't really do it that often. It was more so when he wants to do something good for himself. He came back home, had it in his fridge, and then said like, okay, I'm not going to leave my room until tomorrow morning, and I'm going to have that bar of chocolate now, right? And he knew what he got himself into. Yeah. So if you make that conscious decision and you know the consequences with that, I think your analogy doesn't hold.
That's so awful. I'm so glad I'm not actually lactose intolerant.
Oh yeah, mate, especially because I'm eating each and every single day quark. So it would be so awful.
Right, we're at 53 minutes, so yeah. I don't know if we've got time. We probably don't have time for any more, do we? But thank you for your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. And
we have news. Pascal.
Yeah, we have news. I wanted to bring it up now. So the news are that we have been working on expanding our merchandise or renewing our merchandise, and you can find it over on our website. And it is pretty amazing because what we've done in the past was we were ordering a bulk, and then Steve actually was the one who needed to go to the post office and send it out to each and every one. That was inconvenient. That was
inefficient as hell.
Inefficient.
We didn't get you guys the stuff like
totally. And we didn't really have a wide variety of clothes or products to offer. But this time now, because we're working together with a print-on-demand shop, we can offer you a wide variety of products. Go over to our website, check out all the shirts we are offering right now. Hoodies, shirts, caps, phone cases, mugs, socks, sports bras, leggings. We have everything now. Go over there, check that out. And I think that on Monday, it is still the 3rd of December. So you have 2 days left to actually use the discount code that gives you 15% off of your order until the 5th of December. So, Yeah.
Should we give them the code?
Yeah, I just thought putting it down in the description below.
Oh, nice.
Because
perfect.
when you are saying like rep revive,
R-E.
yeah, people would get it wrong, probably.
Honestly, guys, Pascal's done a great job with this merchandise, and it all looks brilliant. And hopefully, we have no reason to believe it wouldn't all work fantastically. And if you ever wanted to say thank you to us and you kind of want to support us in some way, this is a great way to do it, because we just want to spread the word more. We don't care about any other kind of benefit of the clothing apart from seeing you wearing it just brings us a lot of love.
Yeah, and just something I really thought about just mentioning to the people out there, and that is something I thought of maybe posting in the Facebook group as well, but I'm just now saying that producing the clothing or selling that to you guys doesn't make any kind of profit to us. It is like £2 per piece of clothing, so we won't get rich. But the reason why we are doing it is because we want to be a team, we want to be a family, we want to spread the word, right? And we want you guys to actually have something you can identify with, or just represent the things you can identify with, right? And that is why we put it out there. It's not really to make a lot of money out of it. There's not really any kind of profit to get out of.
In future,
so,
though.
I just wanted, in future, though. No, I just wanted to say that because I would imagine that people may be wondering, why are they doing that now? They want only to make even more money or so, right? And I can promise you, per piece or so, we're making like £2, and it's not that every single day things are being sold. It's like not much. So we just wanted to give you guys some kind of a different platform to represent us, to wear something you can identify yourself with, and also that connects us, as cheesy as it might sound.
And if you do get something, please do tag us on like Instagram or Facebook with a selfie. We'd love to share that around and just grow a nice Revive Stronger family. So good words, Pascal, and I think we'll leave you guys there.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.